Greetings and welcome to the Professing Alls, and welcome to Biblical Greek with Ryan. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about pronunciation and specifically the differences or some of the basic differences between what's called Erasmian Greek or Erasmian pronunciation and modern Greek pronunciation. Now, I didn't get into too much detail about what the two pronunciations are and where they come from and why they exist. Now, if you go back in time, you go back to classical Greek, there are obviously people that speak the language, and then by the time of Koine Greek, there are people speaking the language. But as time goes on, language obviously develops and changes. So by the time you get up to Byzantine Greek, the way that Greek is likely spoken is going to be very different, because you have classical Greek, which was basically a whole bunch of different city-states, and Greek was basically the native language that people spoke. And then you have Koine Greek, where if you're in Greece, yes, your native language is still going to be Greek, which is why your Greek's going to be a little bit more articulate than anywhere else. But there's all these other people that also speak Greek as a trade language as well. And so Greek often simplifies, and it can sound a little bit different from area to area, but even though it's still the same language. But think about English. You know, when the English Empire expanded across the known world, the English developed in different regions differently. The way that English is spoken in America or in Canada and New Zealand and Australia and Hawaii and different parts of America, and even within the UK, right? You have England, you've got Scotland, you've got Cockney English. Like the way that English has developed in different areas, it's the same language, but there are different histories and different words and different local stories and associations that influence the way that the language develops. Then when you get to the Byzantine period, the Greek language doesn't become the trade language really anymore. Latin becomes the trade language basically in the West. Yes, you do have that Greek influence with the Eastern Orthodox Church during the Byzantine period, but at the same time, other languages are really around. And so basically, if you speak Greek, it's because you're from Greece once again. And so Greece is going to naturally develop its language, and the way that they speak the language is going to develop and change in some ways based on history, influences from other languages, and just naturally languages develop in very natural ways. It's hard to really explain how language develops, because there's no simple formula for how it happens. It just does. And part of it has to do with the individuals that make up that language. And then you have modern Greek as well. So when Byzantium fell, when Constantinople fell, and Greek scholars took the Greek manuscripts and took it into Western Europe, where different languages had already started being spoken, like German, Anglo-Saxon English, French, Spanish, and other languages around at the time, Norse languages. Naturally, people who want to study these languages need to learn how they were pronounced and want to go back to the original sources. And so these people that come and bring these manuscripts, they're speaking their way of reading the Greek language, which is Byzantine Greek, but it is 1400 years removed from the original period. So what Erasmus does is he decides, okay, I'm going to try and find similarities between Koine Greek and Latin and try and bring life back to the original Greek pronunciation of Koine and Classical Greek for those learning the classical languages, rather than using the Byzantine and a modern Greek that's now starting to emerge. So the way that Greek is generally taught at Bible college or in university, whether you're learning Biblical Greek or Classical Greek, generally they will use the Erasmian pronunciation because it's probably the closest to what Greek originally sounded. Now, I sort of have my own thoughts about that. I think that Koine Greek probably, to a certain extent, at least by the 2nd century, actually did have some phonetic similarities closer to medieval Greek than the Erasmian Greek based on certain manuscript copies, but nonetheless, his standard is basically the standard that is taught for Classical Greek and Koine Greek. And really even medieval Greek to a certain extent, but medieval Greek, they do have some modern Greek influence. And so you have those people that want to use that Greek, and then you have people that just want to use Greek that we know the way that these letters are pronounced. Because really Erasmus is taking a guess, and he's using a language that isn't necessarily directly related to Greek, which is Latin. Yes, there are certain similarities, and yes, they're both Indo-European languages, but German is an Indo-European language, and there are some phonetic differences between German and Latin-based languages. So just because they come from a similar time period doesn't necessarily mean that they're 100% match. But I do think that Erasmus did a pretty good job, considering he had no native speakers to work with. All right, so he did a very good job. But for people who study, say, modern Greek, when you're used to seeing these letters and used to hearing these sounds, and yes, you might hear people reading the Koine Greek, but it just doesn't sound natural. You don't hear the natural intonation. You don't hear a native accent. You don't associate certain flows in the language. It's a lot easier just to use the modern Greek because you already know the flows in the language. And the intonation and the pitch and the inflection. And so it's just a lot easier just to use modern Greek pronunciation because you have a frame of reference and a standard from those who prefer that perspective. There are some people that would just use Erasmus for Classical Greek and modern Greek for modern Greek. That's perfectly fine. Now, it doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you fall on, because it doesn't really influence your ability to understand the language. My personal opinion, I think that for me, I like using modern Greek because I study a lot of modern Greek. But if you use modern Greek pronunciation, you do have to be aware of how the Erasmian pronunciation does work, because if that's the standard and that's the way that people are generally taught, you need to be able to understand that. So if someone's talking about something, you know what they're talking about. And if you talk about something and you use modern pronunciation, you need to know how to put it in Erasmian pronunciation for those that might not understand it and might be like, huh, what did you say? So it's good to, if you're going to use the modern Greek pronunciation, you kind of have to learn both. You can stick with modern Greek just for a good little while, and it's good just to pick one or the other to start with. Don't learn both at the same time. Pick one or the other, stick to it, and then learn a little bit of the other one, but stick to whatever one you're most comfortable with. Now, I'm just going to give a few examples based on just the alphabet, okay? So these are very simple things. I'm not going to be going into all the differences between Erasmian Greek and modern Greek pronunciation, but I'm going to give you some that are probably the most common and will get you out of most trouble and help you to be the most understood. So talking about letters, so the first letter we're going to be looking at is Vita. Now, I pronounce it with a V sound because that's how it's pronounced in modern Greek. And I wrote it V-I-T-A, Vita. If you're using Erasmian Greek, the name of the letter is Beta. And most of you probably already know the name of the letter as Beta because it's a very common word in English. So you got Vita and Beta. So Beta, the letter B, or Beta is pronounced with the letter B rather than a V in Erasmian pronunciation. Delta is also different. So instead of having that light TH sound, you have the hard D sound, so delta. So if you look at the first few letters, you have A, B, C, D, E in English. So in Greek, you have alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. So gamma is a bit of an exception, but gamma, the letter gamma and the letter C have the same origin from the same Phoenician letter, and you can sort of see if you distort the gamma a little bit, it sort of looks like the letter C. Okay, so apart from C and gamma, you have A, B, D, E, which is the same with Erasmian Greek. So what Erasmus did is looked at the Latin. Okay, Latin pronounces it B, it's a B. Latin pronounces that as a D, it's a D. Okay, so that's how Erasmus sort of worked it. Now, zeta isn't really pronounced all that much different, except when it's in the middle of a word. In the middle of a word, or if it's the last letter of a word, which I don't think it ever does, but it is generally pronounced with a DZ sound. So if it's the first letter, it would be pronounced with a Z sound. So for example, well, let me take the name of the letter, which is zeta. 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 So it has that Z sound, just the Z sound, not the D sound, but the Z sound. Now the word for to save, or I save in Greek, is sozo. So now it has the DZ sound, it's in the middle of a word. So you have sozo, I save. Sozo. In modern Greek, they'll just say sozo. Sozo. So you don't really have that D sound in there. So it's not really a difference in the letter, it's just where it falls in the word will change how it sounds. And it's pronounced zeta, not zeta. So that E sound and that E sound is different because eta is different. So instead of saying eta, you say eta. So it's like e. So it's not as in egg, but it's sort of like air as in air, or fair. Or if you know French, fate is another way that A sound sometimes people pronounce it. So for example, the word for land or earth is guerre. So some people pronounce it guerre, some people pronounce it gay. Doesn't really matter which one you do, whether it's A or air, depending on the person. So this one actually doesn't really have a standard pronunciation because some people pronounce air, some people A. But I pronounce it air if I was using the Erasmian air. Then you have theta. So once again, just like zeta, there's no difference apart from the name of the letter. Okay, so you have, instead of saying theta, that E sound in the middle, you'd say theta. Now the reason why, now let me write these letters. So zeta, eta, theta. So that's how the names are written in Greek. So you have zeta, eta, theta. In modern Greek, they're written the exact same, but the eta now has an E sound. So you have zeta, eta, theta. So that's why the name, the sound of the name changes, as in the name changes, but not the actual sound of the letter, except for eta, of course, because that's actually the sound that's different. The next one is upsilon. Upsilon. So in Erasmian Greek, it has the U sound as in book. Okay, so that double O sound as in book or hook. So upsilon. Now, you may have noticed eta and upsilon both have that E sound, that long E sound. Now, the reason for that is what happened in the Middle Ages is what's called iotization. So there's a lot of letters that just, for whatever reason, started taking more of an iota-based sound, hence why it's called iotization, becoming like iota. So that's why eta takes on an E sound and upsilon takes on an E sound. And there are combination sounds that also do the same thing, which we'll look at probably in the next video or two. So that's the reason why they all shift like this. So you have iota, eta, and epsilon, which all have that same sound, and they can be used as semiconsonants, as in they could be either a vowel or a consonant. Okay, this letter is ki. Ki. So I actually think that if you're learning Erasmian Greek, it is actually helpful to have that ch sound, because you want to distinguish ch from k, the chi from kappa. Because if you have the same sound, now people still learn the language using the same sound, right? It just comes down to vocab. If you know your vocab, then it doesn't matter what the sound is, you're just going to naturally know what the letter is. But it does help to know the difference. So in Erasmian Greek, they pronounce it k, which is why we pronounce it Christ or Christian rather than Christ or Christian in English, or the CH sound that like Trist or Tristan would be very hard to sort of say. And then omega similar with iotization, omega becomes a short O sound. So omega and omicron basically have the same sound. And the only way to tell the difference is vocab. So so omega and chi really have this odd issue. If you go the Erasmian route, chi and kappa are hard to distinguish. If you go the modern route, omega and omicron and eta and epsilon and iota are hard to distinguish, except for vocab. So both sides really have an issue, but really modern Greek probably has more of the issue because there's more similar letters than with Koine Greek, because or the Erasmian Greek, because really Erasmian Greek, the only issue is this letter. With modern Greek, it's almost all the vowels, which makes it nice and fun. But that just gives you a bit of a understanding, a little bit of insight into some of the difference, and I've hopefully explained some of the differences to you. There are obviously more differences than this, and when you see it in writing and speaking, you'll notice a difference a lot more. But really, these are the foundation, because the alphabet is the foundation. So if you understand these differences, generally speaking, if you wanted to convert, say, saying a particular word from modern Greek pronunciation into classical or Koine Greek pronunciation with the Erasmus pronunciation, you'd almost be there with this anyway. There are some other things to be aware of, but these generally will hold up as the most important variants. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and hopefully this has been helpful. Some people find more information helpful, some people find not knowing more helpful. So I hope this has been more of a benefit than a hindrance. And if you find it more of a hindrance, just ignore this video, go on to the next video, okay? So it's been good having you here, and I hope you've enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video, where we're going to be dealing with combination sounds. We'll see you then.